His heart stopped beating on August 16th, 1977. But his voice never did. It's still here. It comes out of car radios, headphones, and department store speakers. And when it does, something strange happens. The hairs on your arms stand up. A shiver runs down your spine. You get goosebumps. It happens when he drops into that low, trembling vibrato in Heartbreak Hotel. It happens when his voice soars with the choir in Suspicious Minds. It happens in the quiet, intimate whisper of Can't Help Falling in Love. It's a physical reaction. It's involuntary. It feels like magic. But it's not magic. It's science. What was it in those sound waves that could hijack a human nervous system? How can a voice recorded over half a century ago still trigger such a powerful biological response in us today? The answer isn't a single thing. It's a cascade of events, a perfect storm of acoustics, neurochemistry, and evolutionary psychology. It's a combination of the physical properties of his voice and the hardwired circuitry of our brains. We're going to look at the 18 scientific reasons that explain this phenomenon. We're going to break down the mechanics behind the shivers. Number 18, did we get chills because everyone else did? It starts with a simple idea. We are social animals. We look to others for cues on how to feel and what to think. This is called social proof. When we see a massive crowd of people screaming, crying, and fainting, our brains take notice. It tells us something important is happening, something powerful. Think about the Ed Sullivan Show on September 9th, 1956. Over 60 million people watched Elvis perform. That was about 82% of the television audience at the time. The cameras famously showed him only from the waist up, but they couldn't censor the sound. The sound wasn't just Elvis, it was the sound of the audience. The screaming was constant. Like, it was a sound of pure, unhinged hysteria. Like, your brain processes this information. A 2011 study published in the journal Current Biology explored this. Researchers found that the popularity of a song influenced how listeners rated it. When subjects were told a song was popular, their brain's reward centers, specifically the nucleus accumbens, showed more activity. We are wired to like what other people like. It's a survival mechanism. It helps us fit in. It bonds us to the group. The screams for Elvis were on another level. They weren't just applause. They were visceral, emotional outpourings. This phenomenon is related to what sociologist Emil Durkheim called collective effervescence. It's the feeling of energy and harmony you get when you're part of a crowd, sharing the same focus. It's the feeling of losing yourself in a larger group. The screams told a generation of listeners, this is important. You should feel something. And this effect snowballs. You hear a story from your mom about seeing Elvis and crying. You see a documentary with archival footage of fainting girls. You read about the global mourning after his death. All these social cues build a legend. They create an expectation. Before you even hear the first note of Jailhouse Rock, your brain is primed. It's been told by millions of other humans that this voice is supposed to affect you. Psychologist Robert Cialdini wrote extensively about social proof in his book, Influence the Psychology of Persuasion. He explains that in situations of uncertainty, we are most likely to look to and accept the actions of others as correct. In the 1950s, this new sound of rock and roll was a huge uncertainty. It was dangerous. It was different. The reaction of the crowd provided the answer. It told everyone this wasn't just music. It was an event. So when you listen to Elvis today, you're not just hearing a voice. You're hearing the ghost of those screams. You're hearing the cultural weight of millions of people over decades, all agreeing that this sound is worth having a physical reaction to. Your brain, being the efficient social organ it is, follows the cue. The chills you feel might not just be your own. They might be an echo, an inheritance from a million other listeners. But what if the effect isn't just social? If you heard Elvis's voice in a vacuum, with no knowledge of his fame, would it still have power? Could our brains be so easily tricked by peer pressure? Or is the social proof just amplifying something that's already there? And in our modern fragmented world of individual playlists, can a new artist ever create that same level of universal collective effervescence again? Number 17, did seeing him change how we heard him? Our brains don't experience the world in isolated boxes. We don't have a hearing part of the brain that's completely separate from the seeing part. They are constantly talking to each other. They blend information to create a single unified reality. This can lead to some strange effects. One of the most famous is the McGurk Effect. It was first described by Harry McGurk and John MacDonald in a 1976 paper in Nature. The experiment is simple. You watch a video of a person saying the sound "ga," but the audio track is of them saying, but what do most people hear? They hear "duh." Their brain takes the visual information from the lips and the audio information from the speakers and splits the difference. It creates a third, completely new sound. It proves that what you see can physically change what you hear. Now think about Elvis. He wasn't just a voice. He was a performance. He was the curled lip. He was the swiveling hips. He was the half-closed eyes during a ballad. He was the explosive, almost violent energy during a rock song. You couldn't separate the sound from the image. When Elvis sang a song like Hound Dog on the Milton Berle Show in 1956, the performance was so visually shocking that it caused a national scandal. People weren't just reacting to the bluesy snarl in his voice, they were reacting to the way he moved his body. The visual information was intense. It was sexually charged, it was rebellious. According to the McGurk Effect, that intense visual information was being processed by the brain at the exact same time as the audio. The visual swagger, the danger, the sensuality of his movements fused with the sound waves entering the ear. The brain didn't hear Hound Dog as just a song. It perceived it as an entire package of rebellious energy. The visual performance added layers of meaning and emotion to the audio that weren't present in the sound waves alone. It made the voice sound more dangerous, more exciting, more raw. Neuroscientists using fMRI scans have pinpointed the brain region responsible for this audio-visual integration. It's called the superior temporal sulcus. This area of the brain works hard to merge what we see and what we hear, especially when it comes to speech and emotional expression. Elvis's performances were a masterclass in emotional expression. When he sang a heartbreaking ballad like Unchained Melody in his final years, the sight of his pain-sweating face and the raw emotion in his eyes was inseparable from the sound of his voice. The visual vulnerability amplified the audible pain. It made the chills more intense. So the Elvis you hear in your head is likely a construct. It's a combination of the pure audio from the records and the stored visual memories from movies, concerts, and TV appearances. The sound of his voice is forever linked to the image of his body in motion, as they are one and the same in the neural pathways of our memory, but this raises some deep questions. How much of the power of his voice is lost on someone who has never seen him perform? Could a blind person experience the full impact of Elvis? And as we move into a world of audio-only streaming and podcasts, are we losing a fundamental layer of human communication by separating the voice from the face? Or number 16, did he sing differently, just to be heard? Imagine being on stage in 1956. The amplifiers are primitive, the PA system is weak, and in front of you are thousands of teenagers screaming at the top of their lungs. The noise is a physical wall. To be heard, you can't just sing. You have to push. You have to cut through the chaos. This situation triggers something called the Lombard Effect. It's a well-documented phenomenon, first described by French otolaryngologist Etienne Lombard in 1911. He noticed that people automatically increase their vocal effort when speaking in a loud environment. You do it yourself without thinking. When you're in a noisy bar or a crowded restaurant, you raise your voice, you speak slower, and you raise the pitch of your voice. It's an involuntary reflex. For Elvis, the Lombard effect wasn't a temporary thing for a noisy bar. It was his professional reality for years. The screaming was a constant. To compensate, his body would have automatically engaged the Lombard reflex. This would have forced him to produce a sound with more power, a higher fundamental frequency, and greater intensity in the performance. In simple terms, he had to sing in a way that was acoustically engineered to slice through the specific frequency range of human screams. A 2017 study from the University of Utah's National Center for Voice and Speech analyzed the acoustic properties of screams. They found that screams occupy a very specific and privileged acoustic niche. Our brains are hardwired to pay attention to them. For a singer to compete with that, they have to produce a sound that is just as, or even more, commanding. The Lombard effect would have changed the very quality of Elvis's voice in a live setting. It likely added a layer of strain, urgency, and raw power that wasn't always present in his studio recordings. When you listen to live recordings like the '68 comeback special, you can hear this. There's an edge to his voice, a kind of desperate energy. He's not just singing to the audience, he's singing against them. This creates a thrilling sonic tension. It's the sound of a human voice battling a force of nature and winning. That struggle, that audible effort is emotionally compelling. It communicates power and control, which can be a direct trigger for awe and chills. This reflex also likely contributed to his incredible dynamic range. He had to be able to go from a near whisper that could draw the audience in to a full-throated belt that could ride over a tidal wave of noise. The constant need to adjust his volume to the environment would have been a form of intense repetitive vocal training. It made his control over his vocal dynamics, the ability to shift from soft to loud and back again, almost supernatural. But what happens to a voice that is constantly under this kind of pressure? Did the Lombard effect contribute to the vocal damage he experienced later in his life? Could that constant state of fighting to be heard create a unique and unrepeatable vocal signature? And if an artist today performed in total silence, with the audience using silent applause apps, would their voice lose that raw, desperate edge that made live music so thrilling? Theory number 15. Does his voice work like a time machine for the brain? Music is a powerful trigger for memory. You hear a song from your high school prom and you're instantly transported back. You can almost smell the gym, feel the awkwardness, see the faces. This is called a music-evoked autobiographical memory. And Elvis's voice is one of the most potent triggers on the planet. Here's how it works. When you listen to music, your brain's auditory cortex processes the sound. But it doesn't stop there. The signal travels to other areas, including the hippocampus, which is the brain's memory center, and the medial prefrontal cortex. A 2009 study led by Peter Janata at UC Davis found that the medial prefrontal cortex, which sits right behind your forehead, acts like a hub. It links the music, the memories, and the emotions associated with those memories. When a familiar piece of music plays, this hub lights up, and the whole network comes alive. For entire generations, Elvis's music isn't just a collection of songs, it's the soundtrack to their lives. Love Me Tender was their first slow dance. Jailhouse Rock was the song playing when they had their first kiss. Suspicious Minds was on the radio during a long summer road trip. The songs are deeply encoded with personal, emotional memories. When they hear his voice, the music acts as a key, unlocking a flood of nostalgia. Nostalgia itself is a powerful emotional experience. The term was coined in the 17th century by Johannes Hofer to describe the profound homesickness of Swiss mercenaries. For a long time, it was considered a disease, but modern psychology sees it differently. Researcher Konstantin Sedikides at the University of Southampton has shown that nostalgia is a vital human emotion. It counteracts loneliness, boredom, and anxiety. It makes us feel more connected to our past and more optimistic about our future. It can even make us feel physically warmer. The chills you get from nostalgia are real. They are a physiological response to a powerful, positive emotional state. When Elvis's voice triggers a happy memory, your brain releases dopamine, the pleasure chemical. This surge of neurochemicals can create the same physical sensations, titles, the shivers, the goosebumps, the characters, as other thrilling experiences. Even if you weren't alive in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, you can still experience a form of this. It's called vicarious nostalgia. You've seen the movies, you've heard the stories from your parents or grandparents. The music is associated with a specific era, a simpler time. Listening to Elvis can trigger a longing for a past you never personally experienced. His voice becomes a symbol for an entire cultural memory. So when you hear Can't Help Falling in Love, you're not just hearing a melody and a lyric. You are hearing a key that unlocks decades of stored memories and emotions, both personal and cultural. The voice is a time machine, and the chills are the sensation of traveling back. But this raises questions about the future. Will Elvis's voice lose this power as the generations who lived with him pass away? Can a piece of music hold its nostalgic power forever, or does it have an expiration date? And could we ever create a nostalgia machine, an AI that composes new music perfectly tailored to trigger our oldest and most cherished memories? Number 14, why are we drawn to the sound of sorrow? There's a deep sadness in Elvis's voice. You can hear it clearly in songs like Are You Lonesome Tonight or his haunting version of Blue Christmas. It's a vulnerability, a crack in the facade of the king, and strangely we are drawn to it. Sad music can feel good, and the science behind this paradox is fascinating. In a 2013 study from the Freie Universität Berlin, led by Lila Taruffi and Stefan Koelsch, investigated why people enjoy listening to sad music. They surveyed over 770 people and found that sad music can evoke a wide range of positive emotions like nostalgia, peacefulness, and wonder. It doesn't always just make us sad. One key reason is that listening to sad music can be a cathartic experience. It allows us to process our own feelings of loss or sorrow in a safe, controlled environment. Elvis's voice is a masterclass in conveying sonic sadness. He does it with a few key techniques. One is the use of vocal fry. That's the deep, slightly gravelly, creaky sound at the bottom of his register. Think of the way he says heart in the opening line of Heartbreak Hotel. And vocal fry is associated with intimacy and seriousness, but also with low energy and sadness. It's the sound of a voice that's almost given up. Another tool is his use of minor keys and blue notes. The blues scale, which forms the foundation of much of his music, is built around notes that sound sad or worrying to the Western ear. These notes create a sense of unresolved tension. When Elvis sings a line that leans heavily on these blue notes, he's tapping into a deeply ingrained cultural and musical language for sadness. But the most powerful element might be something called prosody. Prosody is the rhythm, stress, and intonation of speech. It's how we communicate emotion beyond the words themselves. Think about how a person's voice sounds when they are about to cry. It becomes slower. The pitch wavers, there are long pauses. Elvis was a master of emotional prosody in his singing. In Are You Lonesome Tonight, during the spoken word bridge, his pacing is slow, his tone is somber. It sounds less like a performance and more like a genuine late-night confession. Psychologist David Huron, in his book Sweet Anticipation Music and the Psychology of Expectation, suggests a hormonal explanation. When we listen to sad music, it can trigger the release of prolactin, a hormone that is associated with crying and helps to curb grief. It's a self-soothing mechanism. The brain, tricked by the sad sounds, prepares the body for a traumatic event. When that event doesn't happen because it's just a song, we are left with a pleasurable mix of soothing hormones. We get all the comfort of a good cry without the actual pain. So the chills you feel during one of his sadder songs are a complex cocktail. It's part empathy for the sorrow in his voice, part cathartic release of your own stored sadness, and part a pleasurable wash of neurochemicals designed to comfort you. But why did Elvis, the biggest star in the world, have so much authentic sorrow in his voice to begin with? Was it the loss of his mother, the pressures of fame, or something deeper? And is there a limit to how much sadness we can enjoy in art before it becomes simply depressing? Could a song be scientifically engineered to be too sad to listen to? Number 13, how did he control volume to manipulate our feelings? One of the most underrated weapons in Elvis's vocal arsenal was his control over volume. This is called dynamics. It's the ability to move seamlessly from the softest whisper to the loudest, most powerful belt. This control isn't just for show. It's a primary tool for manipulating the listener's emotions and nervous system. Our brains are hardwired to pay attention to sudden changes in sound. It's a survival instinct. Think of our ancestors on the savannah. A sudden quiet could mean a predator is stalking. A sudden loud noise could mean an attack. Our auditory system is constantly monitoring the environment for these changes. A sudden increase in volume, a crescendo, triggers an arousal response. Our heart rate increases. Our attention focuses, our body prepares for a significant event. A sudden decrease in volume, a decrescendo, does the opposite. It creates a sense of intimacy, vulnerability, or suspense. Elvis used this instinct against us. Take the song Suspicious Minds. It starts relatively calm and conversational. But as the song builds, so does the volume. The verses get stronger, the chorus hits with power. But the real trick is the bridge section, Oh Let Our Love Survive. The music drops down to almost nothing. Elvis's voice becomes quiet, pleading. This sudden drop in volume forces you to lean in. It creates an incredible tension. You know, it's not going to stay quiet. Your brain is anticipating the return of the volume. And when it comes back with an explosive force. The final choruses are a full-throated, gospel-infused roar. This roller coaster of dynamics, from a whisper to a roar, is a form of physiological manipulation. The quiet parts build suspense and draw you in. The loud parts provide a massive, cathartic release. The chills you feel during that final explosion of sound are the result of this perfectly executed tension and release cycle. The science of psychoacoustics studies how we perceive sound. One of its principles is the Fletcher-Munson curves. These curves show that human hearing is not linear. We are most sensitive to frequencies in the mid-range, where most human speech happens. But at very low volumes, we lose the ability to hear the lowest and highest frequencies. At very high volumes, those frequencies become much more prominent. Elvis's dynamic control meant he was constantly changing the perceived tonal balance of his voice. A whispered line would sound warm and intimate. A belted note would sound bright, piercing, and full of powerful high-frequency harmonics. He was effectively changing the EQ of his own voice in real time. This level of control is a physical skill. It requires incredible breath support from the diaphragm and precise control over the vocal cords. It's the kind of skill that opera singers spend decades perfecting. For Elvis to have this intuitive mastery in the context of rock and pop music was revolutionary. He wasn't just singing notes, he was sculpting sound waves in a way that was perfectly designed to play on our brains' built-in alert systems. But where did this control come from? Was it something he learned from listening to the gospel quartets of his youth, who were masters of dynamics? Or was it a purely innate biological gift? And if a modern pop song is compressed to be loud all the way through, as many are, what emotional information are we losing by sacrificing dynamic range? Number 12, did his body act like a perfect instrument? A voice is not just the vocal cords, it's an entire system. The lungs act as the bellows. The vocal cords create the initial buzz, but the final sound, the tone that we recognize as uniquely Elvis, is shaped by the physical spaces in the throat, mouth, and nasal cavities. These spaces are called vocal formants or resonators. The size and shape of these resonators determine the final timbre of the voice. It's the reason why a violin and a trumpet playing the same note sound completely different. Elvis Presley was blessed with a near-perfect physical instrument. His vocal tracked everything into the distance from his larynx to his lips, seems to have been ideally suited for singing. While we can't go back and measure it, acoustic analysis of his recording suggests he had a remarkable ability to tune his vocal formants. One of the most important aspects of a powerful singing voice is the singer's formant. This is a clustering of energy around the 2,500 to 3,200 Hz range. This frequency range is crucial. It's a range that our ears are especially sensitive to, and it's also a range where the sound produced by a typical orchestra or rock band is weaker. A singer who can produce a strong singer's formant will sound like they are cutting through the music. Their voice will have a ring or a ping to it that makes it sound clear and powerful, even over loud accompaniment. This is a technique that top opera singers like Luciano Pavarotti were famous for. Listen to Elvis's big, soaring notes in a song like An American Trilogy, that incredible resonant power that seems to fill the entire room. A large part of that is the singer's formant at work. He is shaping the cavities in his pharynx to create a resonance chamber that amplifies this specific set of frequencies. It's what allowed his voice to sound so huge and commanding in the big showrooms of Las Vegas. Furthermore, the richness of his voice comes from the complexity of the harmonic overtones he produced. Every note sung has a fundamental frequency, but it also contains a whole series of quieter notes above it called harmonics. The relative strength of these harmonics is what gives an instrument its timbre. A voice that is rich in harmonics sounds full, warm, and complex. A voice with few harmonics sounds thin and reedy. Acoustic analysis like that done by speech-language pathologists and voice scientists shows that Elvis's voice was exceptionally rich in these upper harmonics. This could be due to a combination of factors: the physical structure of his vocal tract, his precise control over his soft palate, and the way he used his breath. This harmonic richness is what gives his voice that velvety, luxurious quality. It literally fills more of the sonic spectrum. When our ears receive this complex signal, our brains interpret it as a sound of high quality and emotional depth. It's the audio equivalent of a richly textured fabric. So the chills are a response to a sound that is, from a pure physics perspective, incredibly dense with information. It's not a simple, pure tone. It's a complex wave packed with layers of overtones that our brain processes as rich, powerful, and emotionally significant. But how much of this was conscious technique versus a pure genetic lottery? Could modern biofeedback technology train any singer to manipulate their performance with the same skill? And is it possible that the specific shape of a person's skull could predispose them to having a legendary voice? At number 11, why did the flaws in his voice make it more powerful? Perfection is often boring. It's the small imperfections, the quirks, and the flaws that make something feel human and relatable. In art, this idea is sometimes referred to by the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, the appreciation of beauty and imperfection. Elvis's voice was not technically perfect in the way a classically trained opera singer's is, and that was its secret weapon. His voice contained small imperfections that made it sound real, vulnerable, and deeply human. One of these was his tendency to sing slightly behind the beat. In music, this is called backphrasing. Instead of hitting every note right on the metronomic grid, he would often lag just a fraction of a second behind. This creates a feeling of casual, cool relaxation. It's a key feature of blues and jazz singing. It sounds effortless, it pulls the listener in, creating a subtle tension as our brains wait for him to catch up to the beat. This small flaw in timing is a huge part of what gave his singing its characteristic swagger. Another imperfection was the audible breath. In many of his more intimate recordings, you can clearly hear him take a breath. For example, in the opening lines of Are You Lonesome Tonight, the breath is not just a necessity, it's part of the performance. It creates a sense of closeness, as if he's right there in the room with you. It's a sign of life. It breaks the fourth wall. A 2016 study in the journal PLOS ONE found that listeners rated singers as more emotional when they could hear these non-musical sounds like breathing. The brain interprets these sounds as signs of genuine physiological arousal, not a sterile performance. Then there was the occasional vocal break or crack. In moments of high emotion, his voice would sometimes strain and break into a higher register, a falsetto. You can hear it in some of his raw, early Sun Records recordings. Instead of sounding like a mistake, it sounded like an authentic cry. It was the sound of a voice pushed to its emotional limit. Our brains are exquisitely tuned to the sound of human emotion. A cry is a universal signal of distress. When his voice cracks, it taps into our deep, empathetic pathways. It feels real in a way that a perfectly smooth auto-tune performance never can. A neurologist and writer Oliver Sacks, in his book Musicophilia, discusses how our brains respond to music with a profound and personal connection. We don't just process music as sound, we internalize it. The imperfections in Elvis's voice make that internalization easier. They signal that this is not a machine, this is a human being, with all the frailties and emotions that come with it. This creates a powerful sense of connection and empathy, which can be a direct trigger for chills and other strong emotional responses. The modern music world is obsessed with perfection. Auto-tune can make every note mathematically correct. Digital editing can remove every breath, every squeak, every flaw. But in doing so, we might be removing the very things that make a voice emotionally powerful. Elvis's voice is a testament to the power of imperfection. But where is the line between a powerful imperfection and a simple mistake? How much of Elvis's phrasing was a deliberate artistic choice, and how much was just his natural way of singing? And if we created a perfect AI singer, would we have to program in flaws to make it sound human enough for us to love? Number 10 was his voice, tapping into something ancient in our DNA. Long before we had language, we had vocalizations, we had cries, grunts, sighs, and screams. These are primal sounds hardwired into our brains over millions of years of evolution. They communicate fundamental emotional states: fear, pleasure, pain, and surprise. The argument here is that Elvis's voice, either by instinct or design, was a master at deploying these pre-linguistic, emotionally charged sounds. Think about the raw, guttural growl he uses in songs like Jailhouse Rock. This isn't a clean musical note. It's a sound that mimics an animalistic snarl. In the animal kingdom, a growl is a signal of aggression, dominance, and threat. According to a 2010 study published in Psychological Science, humans are incredibly good at understanding the emotional content of nonverbal vocalizations, even across cultures. Our brains have ancient neural circuits dedicated to processing these sounds. When Elvis growls, he's bypassing the language centers of our brain and speaking directly to these older, more primitive emotional centers. It triggers a jolt of arousal, a mix of fear and excitement. Then there's the sob. His voice often broke into a kind of stylized cry, especially in his ballads. The quaver and tremor in his voice when he sings a line like "My world is empty" is a sonic representation of weeping. A study by Jack Panksepp, a pioneering affective neuroscientist, showed that the sound of a human or animal in distress triggers a specific separation distress system in the brain. It's the same system that makes a mother respond to her baby's cry. It's a powerful trigger for empathy and a desire to provide comfort. When Elvis's voice crees, it's activating this deep-seated nurturing instinct in the listener. He also used sighs and whispers to great effect. A sigh is a universal signal of sadness or relief. A whisper signals intimacy and secrecy. These are sounds that we are biologically programmed to react to. They change our physiological state. A whisper can make us lean in, increasing our focus and creating a sense of a shared secret. This is not about the meaning of the words, it's about the pure emotional data carried in the sound itself. This idea connects to the work of evolutionary psychologists like Steven Pinker, who, in How the Mind Works, argues that music may be an evolutionary byproduct, a kind of auditory cheesecake. But it's a cheesecake that uses ingredients our brains were already evolved to love: the rhythms of walking, the pitch contours of emotional speech, and the timbre of a human voice in a state of high emotion. Elvis's singing is a super stimulus. It takes all these primal vocal triggers and concentrates them into a 3-minute song. The chills, from this perspective, are a kind of evolutionary echo. It's our ancient brain recognizing a sound of profound emotional significance, a cry of distress, a growl of dominance, a sigh of longing and responding with a full body alert. It's a ghost of a survival instinct, triggered by a rock and roll song. But if these sounds are so universal, why don't all singers who growl and sob have the same effect as Elvis? What was unique about his specific use of these primal cues? And as human language becomes more complex, are we slowly losing our sensitivity to this older, more fundamental form of vocal communication? Number 9. Did mixing black and white music create a new neurological response? Elvis didn't invent rock and roll, but he was a catalyst. He took elements from different, often segregated musical worlds and fused them into something new and explosive. He blended the country and western music he heard on the radio with the rhythm and blues and gospel music he heard on Beale Street in Memphis. This fusion wasn't just a cultural event, it was a neurological one. Our brains are prediction machines. As we listen to music, our brains are constantly making predictions about what will come next. What chord will follow? What rhythm will the drummer play? This is based on all the music we've heard before. When our predictions are met, it's satisfying. But according to the work of music psychologist David Huron, it's when our predictions are skillfully violated that we get the biggest emotional payoff. When a song does something unexpected, a sudden key change, a surprising chord, a rhythmic hiccup, it creates a moment of surprise. If this surprise is resolved in a pleasing way, the brain rewards itself with a little hit of dopamine. It's the pleasure of solving a small puzzle. It's a key reason why we enjoy music. In the 1950s, for many white American teenagers, the musical rules they were used to were those of pop singers like Perry Como or Patti Page. The music was smooth, the melodies were predictable, the rhythms were straightforward. Then came Elvis. He brought within the musical language of rhythm and blues. This included the 12-bar blues progression, the use of a strong backbeat emphasis on beats 2 and 4, and the raw, expressive vocal style. For a brain raised on mainstream pop, hearing Elvis for the first time was a series of continuous, pleasurable surprises. The rhythmic structure was different. The vocal delivery was new. The chord progressions felt both familiar and foreign. His music was a constant violation of their musical expectations. A 2006 study from McGill University by neuroscientist Robert Zator's lab showed that the pleasure we get from music is directly linked to dopamine release in the striatum, a key part of the brain's reward system. The study also showed that the amount of dopamine released was highest during moments of peak emotional arousal, the parts of the song that gave the listeners chills. Elvis's musical fusion was a chill-generating machine because it was constantly creating these moments of surprising yet satisfying resolution. He didn't just blend genres, he blended vocal styles. He could sing with the smooth, crooning tone of Dean Martin one moment, and then switch to the raw, shouting style of a bluesman like Big Boy Crudup the next. This constant code switching kept the listener's brain on its toes. You never knew what he was going to do next. This unpredictability is incredibly stimulating for the brain's reward circuits. So the chills weren't just about the sound of his voice in isolation, they were about the context. It was the sound of musical worlds colliding. It was the thrill of the new, the shock of the unexpected. It was the sound of a brain being delighted by a new set of rules. But what happens now in an era where all musical genres are available all the time and genre blending is the norm, has our brain become so accustomed to surprise that it's now harder for an artist to generate that same neurological shock? And could a piece of music be so unpredictable that it's no longer pleasurable? Just confusing. Number 8, how did his unpredictability keep our brains hooked? Beyond the blending of genres, Elvis's vocal performance on a line-by-line basis was incredibly unpredictable. This constant variation is a powerful tool for holding our attention and triggering emotional responses. It's related to the psychological principle of violation of expectation, but on a micro level. Our brains are masters of pattern recognition. When we listen to a song, we quickly learn the pattern of the melody, the rhythm, and the singer's delivery. Most singers are fairly consistent. They sing the first verse much like they sing the second verse. Elvis rarely did this. He treated every line as an opportunity for reinterpretation. He would sing a phrase with a soft, breathy tone and then repeat it later in the song with a hard percussive attack. He would slide up to a note in one verse and then jump down to it from above in the next. He would add a growl, a stutter, or a hiccup seemingly at random. Listen to his 1956 recording of Hound Dog. No two lines are delivered the same way. The level of improvisation and spontaneous ornamentation is staggering. This unpredictability has a direct effect on our brains. As neuroscientist Daniel Levitin explains in his book, This Is Your Brain on Music, our cerebellum and frontal lobes are constantly working to predict the timing and pitch of the next notes. When a singer like Elvis constantly defies those predictions in small, interesting ways, it keeps these brain regions highly engaged. It's like a game between the singer and the listener's brain. This heightened state of engagement can lead to heightened emotional arousal. This is also related to the concept of information rate in communication theory, a field pioneered by Claude Shannon in the 1940s. A message with a very low information rate is predictable and boring like a metronome click. A message with a very high information rate is chaotic and confusing like pure static. The most engaging and interesting signals lie in a sweet spot between perfect predictability and total chaos. Elvis's voice lived in that sweet spot. It was structured enough to be musical, but unpredictable enough to be constantly surprising. Each of these small surprises, a sudden shift in timbre, a rhythmic displacement, an unexpected melisma, can trigger a tiny release of dopamine in the brain's reward center, the nucleus accumbens. A 3-minute Elvis song might contain dozens of these micro-rewards. The cumulative effect of all these little jolts of pleasure can be a powerful emotional experience, culminating in the physical sensation of chills. It's what made him so exciting to listen to. You weren't just passively receiving the song. You were actively engaged, constantly updating your predictions, and being delighted when he subverted them. He wasn't just singing a song, he was playing with your brain. But how did he develop this style? Was it a conscious choice to keep things interesting, or an unconscious overflow of his creative energy? Can this level of spontaneous variation be taught, or is it an innate talent? And if an AI was tasked with creating the most engaging vocal performance possible, would it arrive at a similar strategy of constant, controlled unpredictability? Number 7, did Elvis invent ASMR without knowing it? In recent years, a new internet phenomenon has emerged, ASMR, or Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. It's a tingling, static, sensation that typically begins on the scalp and moves down the back of the neck and upper spine. For some people, it's intensely pleasurable and relaxing. It's often triggered by specific soft sounds like whispering, gentle tapping, or crinkling paper. Millions of people now watch ASMR videos on YouTube to relax or fall asleep. Long before the term ASMR was coined in 2010, by Jennifer Allen, Elvis was triggering similar sensations in listeners with his voice. He was in many ways an unintentional ASMR artist. Think about his ballad singing. On a song like Fever or Can't Help Falling in Love, he uses a soft, breathy, close-mic'd vocal style. This is a classic ASMR trigger. The proximity of his voice, filled with the small, intimate sounds of his breath and mouth, creates a powerful illusion of intimacy. It sounds like he is whispering directly into your ear. For people susceptible to ASMR, this kind of personal, close-up sound is a primary trigger for the tingling sensation. A 2018 study published in the journal Bioimpacts used fMRI to scan the brains of people experiencing ASMR. They found increased activity in brain regions associated with reward and emotional arousal, such as the medial prefrontal cortex and the nucleus accumbens. Interestingly, these are some of the same brain regions involved in social bonding behaviors like grooming in primates. The study suggests that asthma might be a response to sounds that simulate the act of being cared for or groomed by another person. Elvis's gentle crooning ballads are the sonic equivalent of a comforting, protective presence. He also used other sounds that are now recognized as asthma triggers, the soft clicking of his fingers in fever, the gentle strumming of the acoustic guitar. The use of vocal fry, that low, creaky vibration in his voice, is another common trigger. These are all sounds that are detailed, textured, and have a non-threatening, repetitive quality. This doesn't mean that every time someone gets chills from an Elvis song, they are experiencing asthma. The two sensations are distinct. Chills or frisson are often associated with feelings of awe and excitement and are linked to fight or flight responses. Asthma is typically associated with relaxation and calm. But it's highly likely that for some listeners, especially during his quieter songs, the sensation they describe as chills is in fact asthma. And Elvis's incredible dynamic range meant that he was capable of triggering both responses. He could give you the awe-inspiring frisson of An American Trilogy and the relaxing asthma tingles of Love Me Tender on the same album. His mastery of close mic technique, especially in his post-Army studio recordings, was key to this. Engineers like Bill Porter at RCA's Studio B in Nashville got his voice right up on the microphone, capturing every subtle detail. This created a hyper-intimate sound that was perfect for triggering this tingling, pleasurable response. So, could Elvis be considered a pioneer of a sensory phenomenon that wouldn't have a name for another 30 years after his death? Is it possible that some people's deep connection to his voice is because he is one of the few singers who can reliably trigger their asthma? And could the rise of asthma online help us reevaluate his quieter, more intimate recordings as groundbreaking works of sonic therapy? Number 6. Could we catch emotions from his voice? When you see someone smile, you often smile back without thinking. When you hear someone laugh, you might start laughing too, even if you don't know the joke. This is called emotional contagion. It's our brain's tendency to automatically mirror the emotions of others. And it doesn't just work with visual cues, it works with sound. The human voice is a fire hose of emotional information. Through pitch, tone, volume, and rhythm, we can communicate a vast spectrum of feelings. A 2005 study from the University of Geneva analyzed the acoustics of vocal emotional expression. They found that different emotions have distinct acoustic signatures. Joy, for example, is often expressed with a higher pitch and faster rate of speech. Sadness is associated with a lower pitch and slower speech. Elvis was an emotional chameleon with his voice. He could project pure, unadulterated joy in Blue Suede Shoes, and then, on the next track, convey the depths of despair in How's the World Treating You? The theory of emotional contagion suggests that when we listen to him, our brains don't just register these emotions. We begin to feel them ourselves. This process may be rooted in our brain's mirror neuron system. Mirror neurons were first discovered in the 1990s by a team of Italian researchers led by Giacomo Rizzolatti. They found that specific neurons in a monkey's brain fired both when the monkey performed an action like grabbing a peanut and when it simply watched another monkey perform the same action. Later research suggests that a similar system exists in humans and that it might be the basis for empathy. When we listen to Elvis sing with a pained, cracking voice, our brain's mirror system may be firing as if we were producing that sound ourselves. We are, in a sense, simulating his emotional state in our own minds. This simulation can then trigger a genuine emotional and physiological response in our own bodies. His sadness becomes our sadness. His joy becomes our joy. Think of his legendary 1968 performance of If I Can Dream. The song is an impassioned plea for hope and unity. His vocal delivery is filled with desperation, strain, and ultimately triumphant power. He's not just singing the lyrics, he is emoting them with every fiber of his being. The audible strain in his voice, the way he pushes his vocal cords to their limit, is a powerful signal of extreme emotional effort. Through emotional contagion, the audience catches this state of high emotional arousal. The chills and tears in the audience are a direct, mirrored response to the raw emotion being projected from the stage. This makes his voice more than just a pleasant sound. It becomes a tool for direct emotional transfer. He wasn't just telling you a story about heartbreak. He was making you feel a measure of that heartbreak yourself. The chills are a sign that this emotional transfer has been successful. Your body is reacting as if it is experiencing the emotion firsthand. But this raises some profound questions. How much of the emotion in his voice was a genuine feeling, and how much was a technical performance of that feeling? Does it matter to our brains if the emotion is real or acted? And if a voice can transfer emotions so effectively, could it be used for therapeutic purposes to infect a depressed person with feelings of joy? Number 5, why does his voice literally give us goosebumps? The experience of getting chills or goosebumps from music is so common that it has a scientific name, frisson. The word is French for aesthetic chill. It's that wave of pleasure mixed with a cold shiver that runs down your spine during a particularly moving part of a song. And Elvis's voice seems to be a remarkably reliable trigger for it. Jack Panksepp, a neuroscientist who pioneered the study of emotions in animals, was one of the first to link this experience to our evolutionary past. He suggested that frisson is a remnant of an ancient separation distress response. When young animals are separated from their mothers, they let out a distress call. This call often has a specific acoustic quality bass. It's high-pitched and wavering. This sound triggers a drop in body temperature in the young animal. The shivers and piloerection goosebumps are the body's attempt to warm itself back up. Panksepp's theory is that human music, particularly a powerful singing voice, can sometimes mimic the acoustic properties of these primal distress calls. A soaring, high-pitched note from Elvis, especially one with a strong vibrato, might be hijacking this ancient neural circuit. Our brain misinterprets the musical peak as a distress call, triggering a vestigial physiological reaction. We get the goosebumps and the shiver, but because we are in a safe, pleasurable context listening to music, our brain reinterprets the sensation as something positive and thrilling. More recent research using neuroimaging has built on this. A 2011 study from Robert Zator's lab at McGill University found that intense frisson experiences correlate with the release of dopamine in the dorsal striatum, the same part of the brain that's activated by food, sex, and addictive drugs. The chills you get from Elvis are, quite literally, a rush of pleasure-inducing neurochemicals. The specific musical events that trigger frisson are often sudden changes, a sudden increase in loudness. The entry of a new instrument or voice, like the backing choir in Suspicious Minds. Or a moment of unexpected harmony. Elvis's music is packed with these triggers. His dynamic control, his use of backing vocalists, and his surprising melodic turns are all perfectly designed to elicit a frisson response. A study from USC, led by Matthew Sachs in 2016, found that people who regularly experience frisson from music have structural differences in their brains. They tend to have more nerve fibers connecting their auditory cortex, where sound is processed to their anterior insular cortex and medial prefrontal cortex areas involved in emotional processing. This suggests that for some people, the connection between sound and emotion is physically stronger. They are hardwired to get chills from music. So when Elvis's voice soars and the orchestra swells in the final moments of an American trilogy, a perfect storm is happening in your brain. The sound is mimicking a primal cry. Your dopamine system is flooding your brain with pleasure, and if you're one of the lucky ones, your brain's unique wiring is turning that audio-emotional signal into a full-body shiver. But why do some people experience frisson and others don't? Is it purely genetic, or can you learn to feel it? Could we create a piece of music that is scientifically guaranteed to give 100% of listeners frisson? And what other ancient survival reflexes might be hiding in our aesthetic experiences? Number 4, is Elvis's voice a drug? This sounds like a metaphor, but when you look at the neurochemistry, it's closer to a literal truth. Listening to Elvis's voice, for many people, triggers a powerful release of dopamine in the brain. As we've seen, dopamine is a key neurotransmitter in the brain's reward system. It's the chemical that tells your brain, that was good, do it again. The connection between music and dopamine was powerfully demonstrated in the 2011 McGill University study by Valerie Salimpor and Robert Zator. Using PET scans, they showed for the first time that listening to intensely pleasurable music, the kind that gives you chills, causes dopamine to be released in the striatum. This is the same brain region, targeted by potent stimuli like cocaine, amphetamines, and a good meal. The study revealed something even more interesting. Dopamine was released, not just at the peak emotional moment of the song, but also a few seconds before it, in a different part of the striatum. This is the anticipatory phase. This is crucial to understanding the power of Elvis's voice. When you listen to a song you know and love, like Suspicious Minds, your brain remembers what's coming. It knows that incredible, explosive final chorus is on its way. In anticipation of that peak moment, your brain starts releasing dopamine. This is the pleasure of anticipation. It's the feeling you get waiting for your favorite part of a song. Then, when the moment actually arrives, there's a second, even bigger flood of dopamine as a reward. Elvis's music is perfectly structured to exploit this two-stage reward process. His songs often build slowly, creating tension and expectation before delivering a massive, cathartic payoff. This creates a powerful cycle of wanting and liking, mediated by dopamine. It's what makes you want to listen to the song again and again. You are, in effect, chasing that neurochemical high. This dopamine effect can also explain the addictive quality of his music for his fans. The reward system is designed to reinforce survival behaviors, but it can be hijacked. When an activity like listening to a specific singer consistently triggers a dopamine release, the brain learns to crave that activity. This isn't the same as a chemical addiction, of course, but it uses the same neural pathways. Furthermore, music can also influence the levels of other neurochemicals. A 2001 study showed that listening to pleasurable music can increase levels of serotonin, a neurotransmitter associated with mood regulation and well-being. The calming, comforting quality of Elvis's ballads may be linked to this serotonin effect. Other studies have suggested music can lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol. The combined effect, a surge in dopamine and serotonin, and a reduction in cortisol, is a potent neurochemical cocktail that can produce feelings of euphoria, comfort, and deep satisfaction. So when we say Elvis's voice is intoxicating, we're not just being poetic. We're describing a real neurochemical event. The sound waves are triggering a cascade of chemicals in your brain that is similar in some ways to a psychoactive substance. The chills are a physical manifestation of this internal chemical rush, but this raises some fascinating questions. If listening to Elvis is like a drug, could it have therapeutic uses for conditions like depression or anxiety, which are linked to dopamine and serotonin imbalances? Could a person build up a tolerance to their favorite Elvis song, requiring new music to get the same dopamine hit? And is the modern music industry's focus on creating hooks and earworms a deliberate attempt to manipulate this dopamine reward cycle for commercial gain? Number 3, what made his voice sound so incredibly full? When you listen to Elvis, his voice never sounds thin. It has a weight, a body, a richness that seems to fill the entire sonic landscape. This isn't just a subjective feeling. It's a measurable physical property of the sound waves he produced, related to harmonics and overtones. Any sound produced by a natural instrument, including the human voice, is not a single, pure frequency. It's a complex sound wave made up of a fundamental frequency, the note being sung, and a whole series of quieter, higher frequency waves called overtones or harmonics. The specific combination and relative loudness of these overtones are what give a sound its unique character, or timbre. It's why a piano and a guitar playing the same note sound different. Elvis's voice was exceptionally rich in these overtones. When he sang a note, he wasn't just producing that one frequency, he was producing a whole stack of beautifully aligned harmonics above it. This is what voice coaches sometimes refer to as ring or resonance. This richness has a profound effect on how our brain perceives the sound. A sound with a complex harmonic structure is interpreted by our brain as being full, powerful, and emotionally resonant. Is a sound with a simple harmonic structure, like a pure sine wave from a computer, sounds thin, sterile, and uninteresting. This richness was likely due to a combination of his physical anatomy and his learned technique. As mentioned before, the physical shape of his pharynx, mouth, and nasal cavities acted as a superb resonating chamber. But he also had an intuitive mastery of how to use that chamber. By subtly adjusting the shape of his throat and the position of his tongue and soft palate, he could emphasize certain overtones and de-emphasize others. He was, in effect, playing his own vocal tract like an instrument, constantly tuning its resonant properties to create the most pleasing and powerful sound. This is particularly evident in his lower register. His low notes weren't just low, they were packed with a warm, buzzing array of upper harmonics. This is what gives his voice that famous velvet quality. It's the acoustic equivalent of a deep, rich color. This harmonic complexity also helps to explain why his voice sounds so good on so many different kinds of audio equipment, from a tiny transistor radio in the 1950s to a high-end stereo system today. A sound that is rich in harmonics can survive having some of its frequencies filtered out. Even if the radio speaker can't reproduce the lowest fundamental notes, your brain can often reconstruct the missing fundamental by hearing the pattern of the overtones that are present. This phenomenon is called the missing fundamental. Elvis's harmonically rich voice was robust. It was packed with enough sonic information to sound great even on low-fidelity systems. The chills you get are, in part, a response to being saturated with this dense, complex sonic information. Your auditory system is being flooded with a beautifully structured, harmonically rich signal. Your brain recognizes this complexity and interprets it as a sound of high quality and significance, triggering a powerful aesthetic and emotional response. But how much of this harmonic control was a conscious skill he could have explained versus a completely intuitive process? Could we use spectral analysis to create a harmonic fingerprint of his voice that no impersonator can truly replicate? And if you stripped all the overtones from his voice, leaving only the fundamental frequencies, would it still have any emotional power at all? Well, number 2, was his 3-octave range a biological cheat code? One of the most frequently cited facts about Elvis's voice is its incredible range. He could comfortably sing from a low G1, the growling bottom note of King Creole, all the way up to a high B5 in falsetto, with a usable full voice range of about 3 octaves. For a male pop singer, this is exceptional, but the range itself isn't the whole story. It's how he used that range to manipulate our brains. A wide vocal range gives a singer a much larger emotional palette. In human speech, we naturally use pitch to convey emotion. A high pitch is associated with excitement, joy, or panic. A low pitch is associated with seriousness, sadness, or authority. Because Elvis had such a huge range, he could deploy these pitch-based emotional cues with dramatic effect. He could start a song in a low, intimate baritone register, drawing you into the story. This low, resonant sound can have a calming, grounding effect on the listener. It sounds authoritative and comforting. Then, as the emotion of the song builds, he could soar up into a high, powerful tenor range. This sudden upward leap in pitch is a powerful arousal trigger for the brain. It mimics a cry or a shout of excitement. It signals to the listener that the emotional stakes have been raised. A song like Surrender is a perfect example. It begins in a relatively low, controlled register, but it builds to a massive, soaring, operatic climax, with Elvis hitting a powerful high G4. This journey from the bottom of his range to the top is a sonic metaphor for a journey of rising emotion. The listener's own physiological state, to their heart rate, their breathing rate, then often mirrors this upward trajectory. The chills often arrive at that peak high note, the culmination of the musical and emotional climb. His range also allowed him to sing in multiple genres convincingly. He had the low notes for country and gospel. He had the mid-range power for rock and roll. He had the high, clear tenor for his pop ballads. This versatility meant his voice could provide a constant source of novelty for the brain. Furthermore, his ability to switch between different vocal registers from chest voice to head voice to falsetto was seamless. This gave his voice a dynamic, unpredictable quality. The sudden jump to a light, airy falsetto, as he often did in his early rockabilly songs, was a surprising and thrilling sound. It violated expectations and kept the listener's brain engaged. This kind of vocal dexterity is rare and signals a high degree of physical skill and control, which can itself be a source of awe for the listener. The sheer biological fact of his range set him apart. In a 2007 analysis by the vocal analysis group Voca People, Elvis's range was identified as one of the widest in popular music. This wide range meant he was never vocally boring. He always had another gear to shift into, another place to take the melody. This vast sonic playground he inhabited gave him more tools than almost any other singer to play on our emotions. But was this range purely a gift of his physical anatomy, the length and thickness of his vocal cords? How much did his training as a young singer, listening to the wide ranges of gospel, bass, and tenor singers, help him develop and control it? And is there a theoretical, perfect vocal range for a singer to maximize their emotional impact on a listener? Number 1, how did his vibrato hijack our nervous system? If there is one single defining characteristic of Elvis's voice that seems to be a universal trigger for the chills, It is his vibrato. Vibrato is the slight, rapid fluctuation in pitch that singers use, especially on sustained notes. It's not a single steady pitch, it's a wave, and the specific properties of Elvis's vibrato may be the master key to understanding his vocal power. A typical vibrato in Western classical singing has a rate of about 5 to 7 cycles per second, hertz. Studies in the psychoacoustics of music, such as those published in the Journal of Voice, have shown that listeners perceive a vibrato in this range as sounding warm, rich, and emotionally expressive. A vibrato that is too slow can sound like a wobble or a waver, often associated with old age. A vibrato that is too fast can sound nervous or anxious, like a bleat. Elvis's vibrato fell squarely in that 5 to 7 hertz sweet spot. It was, acoustically speaking, the perfect vibrato for conveying controlled, powerful emotion. But there's a deeper, more primal theory about why this specific rate of vibrato affects us so profoundly. This goes back to the work of scientists who study emotional vocalizations. They've found that when humans and many other mammals are in a state of high emotional arousal, fear, excitement, anger, sadness, their muscles, including the small muscles around the larynx, develop a subtle tremor. This tremor is a natural result of the fight or flight response as the nervous system primes the body for action. This tremor has a frequency of around 4 to 8 hertz. This is a stunning coincidence. The frequency of a natural, emotion-induced human muscle tremor is almost identical to the frequency of a musically pleasing vibrato. The theory is that when we hear a singer use a vibrato in this range, our brain interprets it as a sonic signature of genuine, high emotional arousal. It's as if we are hearing the singer's nervous system vibrating with feeling. Elvis's control over his vibrato was astonishing. He could apply it to any note at any volume. He could start a note straight and then slowly introduce the vibrato, building the emotional intensity. In his ballads like Can't Help Falling in Love, he uses a slow, gentle, shimmering vibrato that communicates vulnerability and tenderness. In his big, powerful anthems like My Way, he uses a wider, more powerful vibrato that communicates strength and conviction. This sound, this perfect sonic representation of a human nervous system under emotional load, triggers a powerful empathetic response in the listener. Our mirror neurons fire, our own nervous system begins to resonate with the emotion being communicated. The chills are the physical evidence of this empathetic connection. It's your body reacting to what it perceives as a direct signal of profound emotion from another human. His vibrato was not just a musical ornament, it was a direct line into the listener's autonomic nervous system. It was a perfectly tuned key designed to unlock our deepest, most visceral emotional responses. But this leaves us with the ultimate questions. Did Elvis know he was doing this, or was he just a natural genius whose emotional state spontaneously produced this perfect, neurologically effective sound? Could a modern singer be trained to replicate not just the rate, but the subtle emotional nuances of his vibrato? And if we finally build a perfect, sentient AI that can sing, we'll have to learn to simulate the tremor of a nervous system it doesn't have, just to make us feel something.